Welcome to The Secrets of Success. By following the proven techniques of the guests who appear on this series, you'll learn that even successful people run into detours and failures, and how you can apply their success techniques to change your life.
You're now listening to the most unique show on radio, the show dedicated to making you a success. Are your employees fearful? Today, Bill Treasurer will tell us how to change fear to courage. Bill, thanks for being with us today.
Bill, it's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to the time we're going to spend together.
Now, Bill, just to start off with, you actually have a company called Giant Leap Consulting. And if I read your book correctly, it deals with building courage. So can you tell us something about your consulting company?
Sure. It's Giant Leap Consulting is a courage-building business. We help people and organizations be more courageous so they can drive out fear and get superior results.
Hey, that sounds like what we all want to do, so if we can just follow your advice, I think we're in good shape. I would say from going through your book, you know something about driving out fear, because I had to read it a few times. I wanted to make sure you were talking about yourself. You were formerly a member, if I'm correct, of the United States high diving team, which, again, if I read the book correctly, means you go up as high as 100 feet, you stand on a 1-foot square platform, and you dive down 100 feet, which is basically 10 stories. Did I read that correctly?
And at all that time, Bill, I think the real courage was that I was protected only by a Speedo.
I would get scared walking up the ladder after the first 3 steps. And with the way you presented that, the 10 stories, and you're on a 1-foot square platform, I said, oh my gosh, if anybody wants to know about courage, this is the man to talk to. So I think we're talking to the right person.
Well, we were diving that high from 100 feet, traveling at speeds in excess of 50 miles an hour. And my starting point, as you know, is that I'm a high diver who started out with a profound fear of heights. But I had a coach who believed in me and my potential, and through an incremental process of modulating between comfort and discomfort, slowly, incrementally, over a period of time, I was able to dominate my fear. I'm still afraid of heights, but it no longer debilitates me.
Well, I hope your book will help me, because if I'm asked to do something, if I go up on a ladder more than 3 feet, and that's a ladder leaning against the house, I'm certainly not diving. I start to shake, and I look down, and I say, maybe someone else should do this. But that's a story for another day. Bill, your book starts off with an interesting saying, which is, management sucks. Now, why do you say that?
Well, there's almost BM and AM. There's before management, when you're looking at being a manager and it looks like, oh, I'm going to go and play golf and I'll be able to make decisions and I'll influence things and I won't have to do the real work anymore. I can just direct it. And it seems so easy before you get into the role. You sort of lust after it. And then you get in the role and you quickly find out, oh, my gosh, it's so hard. You've got people above you pressing you for greater production, greater results, greater output, and you got people below you who have different idiosyncratic needs as human beings. So you get in the role and you get vastly disappointed and your expectations are not met very quickly. And at that point you have to decide, do I really want to be in management? And if I do, what am I going to do so that I don't go insane because it's so full of pressure?
Now, you mentioned, too, that no one takes on initiative to do extra work anymore. Is that really that widespread? I mean, occasionally we, meaning I'm of the consumer world, and I'll go into a place and I'll say, gee, you'd think the manager would help that kid over there or that young employee, because you see they're floundering. But you obviously see it on a much broader scale. And are people really that afraid to take any initiative?
I think, this was partly based on my own jaded experience. When I moved into a management role, I found out very quickly that it sort of did suck for me. I had people that would give very uneven levels of performance, that weren't hungry to succeed, that were slow delivering results. And some of it was me and my unrealistic expectations and my impatience, and some of it was them. Over time, though, I realized that as a leader, you can do things to enhance the performance of the people that you're privileged to lead, and it's an honor to do so. But nobody sort of gets into a leadership or management role with an instant playbook. You have to learn by rote, and you have to learn through mentorship.
You mentioned also that You say the problem has to do with comfort and fear, which sounds like, two direct opposites. And I'm sure that 22-year-old employee, whether they're starting out in a restaurant, those are the most visible, or in a short order place, etc., they're not thinking of those words. So can you explain what you mean when you say that's the root of the problem?
I think that a lot of people get into a low-level tolerance of misery. They become comfortable in a fearful or anxious situation. It's low level, but they become comfortable being afraid, and I mix those words together and call them comfortable. And it's dangerous when you're surrounded by comfortable workers, because apathy and complacency can start to take over, and it erodes the production of a company.
So now we're kind of stuck in the middle. We're asking ourselves, if I'm sitting there listening to this show, am I the guy who's too comfortable, or am I the woman who's too fearful? And I guess that's the two divisions of the world. Am I getting the picture correctly?
You're absolutely right. It seems like that if we were to divide in half the sort of lackadaisical production, or the people that don't have good output, or the people who are not energetic or not fully engaged, and divide that group in half, you're going to have people that are entirely too comfortable and have gotten complacent, or you've got people entirely too afraid and are stuck in inaction because they're afraid to move. Those two populations can be dangerous for a workforce. Fortunately, courage becomes the antidote to both equations.
Now, again, everybody wants to be a manager. That's a goal, to move up the line, do something. And you tell us how to be successful. In fact, I think I took this word for word. You say your success as a manager will be determined by how you manage workers who are either too comfortable, too afraid, TOO, or both. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Your job as a leader is to make sure that you're inspiring the leadership capabilities of other people around you and activating it, building confidence in them, stretching their capabilities. And to do that, that means you have to nudge them out into discomfort. And you're not going to find that with comfortable workers. The antidote becomes, you've got to make people uncomfortable. And, Bill, I don't mean that in a fear-stoking, punitive way, but I mean it in a way that nudges them out into discomfort as they pursue stretch goals, as they do things that are outside their current skill area, so that they keep their careers invigorated, so that they keep acquiring new skills. Because the more new skills they acquire, the more they can add value to the organization that they're a part of. But your job as a leader is about activating the courage inside of people so you prevent comfortable, or you convert it into passion for their jobs.
Bill, we want to take a second to remind our listeners that you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan. Our guest today is Bill Treasurer. He's the author of the book, Courage Goes to Work. And Bill, would you tell us, number one, where we can get the book, and is there a website where we can get more information about the book?
Sure. Well, for one, they can get the book at any one of their online retailers. You can also get it in the regular bookstores. You may have to go to the front and ask them. And then secondly, they can go to couragebuilding.com to find out more about me and my company.
Easy enough to remember, and of course we'll give that information again throughout the show. And for someone who is thinking of moving up the line, even if it's your first job, your second job, a part-time employment through high school or college, these are good lessons to look at and look around you. Is everybody afraid to make a decision? Are they too comfortable in their position? They get there about 10 after 9, they leave about 4:45, and no one's saying anything to them. Is that the company that is really going to be your future, or is that going to be the company when someone talks about, remember the good old days when so-and-so company was there, because they're out of business and they're no longer profitable or successful? Now, how is this, and or does it affect? Today we're hearing more and more about short-term contractual jobs. Most of us are hired not for 40 years anymore and get the gold watch and have the nice dinner. We're hired to do a particular job or for a case or a particular project. Does that change anything?
That's a good question, Bill. My opinion is that what matters at the end of the day is the mirror check. Can I look in the mirror and be proud of the person that I am? And I think that if you do, we might call that sort of the gig economy, where I take a gig. I'm working from this project to the next project. And in fact, my business for the last 18 years has sort of been that. As a consulting company, if I don't get projects and I'm not, sort of delivering for the clients, I won't eat and I won't feed my family. So you have to constantly be searching for work. But you have to, so many businesses now, because of the gig economy, are talent driven. You have to deliver, you have to do a good job, and you have to build relationships with clients along the way. And you're not going to be doing that if you're in a place of constant fear and a constant complacency. You've got to keep yourself contemporary. You've got to keep building your skills, trying new things, extending yourself, taking on bigger projects, so that you're adding more value to the companies you serve, and you're becoming more capable as a result. So I think in a gig economy, the courage may be more important for, say, a solopreneur, for example.
I like that, and I'm thinking that as a young person, most of us fall into that great, we're not the leaders of the group. We like to think we are, but we're in that great 90%, not the best, not the worst. We're in there plugging, making our salary, trying to enjoy life. And some of these tips that you're giving us, take something on, take a risk, especially if you're 22 or 23. You're probably not going to be working for that company for the next 5 or 10 years even. You're probably going to be moving on. And if you can establish some accomplishments, or perhaps at worst, you find out that, gee, this is not just for me. I really don't like this. I don't want to be a leader. I want to be a good worker. Or maybe I want to be in another field altogether. And it's time to start, making some direction there. Now, I think you actually have divided up courage into 3 different buckets. Can you tell us what they are?
Sure. I think that not all courage is the same, and it's intimidating to think so. That if we think, wow, courage, that's for the heroes and the people who, climb mountains and the people who walk on the moon and such. And then it keeps courage at a distance from ourselves. So I break courage down into manageable chunks that I call the 3 buckets of courage. There are 3 different behavioral expressions of courage. The first, and all of them begin with the letter T, the first is try courage. Trying something that you haven't done before. Other people may have done this thing, but you haven't crossed this threshold yet. It's a foreign experience for you. You're facing the unknown. It requires action and initiative, and you could wipe out and hurt yourself in the process. And we call that try courage, to do something you haven't done before, which is different than the second bucket of courage, which often involves emotional vulnerability, getting disarmed, what we call trust courage, releasing my need to control or my need to be right, such as delegating to others and giving up some degree of control over a task to somebody else. The challenge here is that when I delegate, you could screw up and harm me by making a mistake. So I'm not sure if I'm going to take the risk of entrusting you. So we call that trust courage. And then the third bucket of courage is the courage of voice or assertiveness. And this is the one that we typically think of when people are being courageous in the workforce, is saying the impolitical thing. It's not biting your tongue to go along and get along, but asserting your truth, asserting your opinion, even if it runs counter to the popular opinion in the company. And that might mean giving direct report to a direct report, giving direct feedback. It could be giving direct feedback to a peer. Could be giving upward feedback to a boss or maybe even a customer, saying something that needs to be said. But it's hard to do because if you say something that is contrary to the popular held belief, you might be cast out of the group and no longer belong to the tribe. So each one of these buckets of courage comes with a risk, and that's why it involves courage. But try, trust, or tell.
Bill, I think part of reading your book, Courage Goes to Work, is as we're reading it, we're saying to ourselves, wait a minute, he's describing me. Or that was me a year ago before I took some affirmative steps. Or that's Jackie and she needs my help, otherwise she's going to fail. And my division of the company or my area or my section is not going to be doing too well, and perhaps even the company as a whole will not do too well if this new project fails. So I think it brings a lot to light for all of us, and maybe rings a little bell for us to say, are we taking advantage of these 3 T's, as you call them: try more, trust more, and tell what you're thinking. Bill, it's time for us to take a little break, but at this point in the show, we'd like to remind our audience that I'm Bill Horan. Today, I'm talking to Bill Treasurer. He's the author of Courage Goes to Work. You're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. We'll be back shortly.
90.3 WHPC reminds you that any time is a great time to get a memory screening. Memory screenings are a quick, easy, non-invasive way to give your brain a checkup and an important part of overall health and wellness. The Alzheimer's Foundation of America's National Memory Screening Program can help you find a screening site near you. Plus, the Alzheimer's Foundation of America's toll-free helpline, staffed by licensed social workers, can provide support services for individuals living with Alzheimer's disease and their caregivers. If you or someone you know needs help caring for a loved one with Alzheimer's disease, or to find out about the memory screening program, please call 866-232-8484 or visit www.alzfdn.org. This message brought to you by the Alzheimer's Foundation of America and the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, and today we're talking to Bill Treasurer, the author of Courage Goes to Work. Bill, you have a statement here, and I think this is something we always look for certain takeaways, that if someone is running a business, it can be a small office, an accounting office, or it can be a very large corporation. And I think you said in your book, work directed by comfort and or fear will always result in underperformance. And that's a pretty scary thing in these times, because we see so many stores, institutions that have been around for years closing up because society is changing. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, anytime that you're complacent, you're falling behind, right? I mean, if you just imagine that you had a cab business and you ran a taxi business, and you did that for years and years, and suddenly you hear about Uber and Lyft, you'd feel threatened by those, and maybe you would reject it and say, well, those things are passing fads. They're going to. Or you could research it and see what is it about. Maybe go in one of the rides yourself and say, well, what does this mean for me? And then you have choices to make. So, staying contemporary, being aware of what innovations are happening so that you don't fall behind. And complacency is a killer of any career and leadership. But so is fear. You don't want to be operating out of desperation. A certain degree of desperation early in the life of a business with an entrepreneur is okay. It creates hunger. But if you have constant levels of high anxiety, nobody's going to want to be around you because you're desperate in the way that a desperate mate is before they're, dating and such. So too much comfort, too much anxiety are killers for a career, and courage because the antidote.
Bill, in your book, you have, I guess I would say, something of a role model in a gentleman. I think his name was Hamilton Riddle. Can you tell us why you mentioned that anecdote in your book?
Oh, Bill, thank you for mentioning Hamilton Riddle, because I'm going to have to make sure that he gets to hear this radio interview. Hamilton Riddle is he's like famous among high divers, that's for sure. He's a larger than life figure, literally. He's about 6'6", I want to say, an ectomorph of a man. Still, now he's in his 60s and he's still got a Greek godlike body. But we were up at the Osmond family extravaganza. The Osmonds put on a show. They typically did in the summertime. They would put on a real live show at Brigham Young Stadium. Thousands and thousands of people. They would sell it out. And the U.S. high diving team was one of their featured acts that year. I was there with Crystal Gale. I was there with Mr. T. And then they had the high diving show. And here it was in front of 50,000 people, but none of the high divers wanted to do the dive. And the reason was because we knew that they were going to be turning the lights off and then shining a light on the high diver, so the light would be right in their face, and they were going to light off fireworks right behind it. So all of these heroic high divers, none of us had the guts to do the 100-foot dive in front of 58,000 screaming fans in Brigham Young Stadium. And finally, gruff Hamilton Riddle, you wimps, he just decided, I'm going to do it. And here he was the old-timer. He was the old veteran. And there he is. He climbs the 100-foot ladder all the way to the top. And I got to tell you, Bill, it was mythic. It was beautiful. The lights went out, shone the light on him. All these fireworks are going off behind him, and he has 2 Roman candles, one in each hand, and he does a beautiful dive in front of 58,000 people. It was a sight to behold, and all of us other divers who didn't have the guts to do it felt diminished. He stepped into his courage, we stepped into our cowardice, and we learned a lesson that day.
I think that story is going to stay with me for quite a while, because you most of the time we're not asked to do anything that dramatic, that kind of activity that would take literally that much courage. We might be asked to go talk to a complaining client or someone who's upset that we don't have their favorite kind of jelly or toast or soft drink or something, but rarely do we have something that is physically that challenging. And I think if he could do it and be the leader, it kind of shows us perhaps what we can do and the impression that we'll have on the staff members who are watching us, and you know, our direct report, so to speak. So
leadership
I love that story.
Is so much about role modeling. Leadership is so much about role modeling, and to watch that moment, it also reminds us that you're right. We may not have a moment as dramatic than that, but we do have these step-up moments. And what will we do in that step-up moment? Will we sort of get to the clutch and do it ourselves, or will we decline the moment and then regret it for the rest of our lives? A lot of times, the risks we regret the most are the ones that we didn't take.
Bill, I'd like to remind our audience that if you're just tuning in, you're listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan. Our guest today is Bill Treasurer, spelled just the way you would expect, Treasurer, and he is the author of a book, Courage Goes to Work, and he's giving us some very basic principles that if you want to succeed and move ahead of the masses that are just going to work every day and working with their head down and not looking to impress anybody, there's some very easy rules in here. You just have to follow them and do them. Bill, can you tell us about the website and where we can get more information and where we can get the book?
Sure. You can find the book at any online retailer and your hard book stores as well. You can find my company at couragebuilding.com, because courage building is just as important as team building.
And to our audience also, if you are an employer or an employee who likes what you're hearing and would like to hear it again or impress somebody else with this information, you can go to NCC Radio for Nassau Community College Radio.org, but just nccradio.org. Look under podcasts and look under the show, Courage Goes to Work, with our guest, Bill Treasurer. You can listen to it at your convenience anytime. If you want to go back and get some notes on it and say, let me just practice this and see if what he's saying works. And obviously, if Bill has been doing this for a number of years and he has a consulting company, you know the major companies are coming to him for advice, and it works. And if it works for him, if it works for the big companies, it can work for your fast order place, it can work for your dental office or accounting firm or plumbing company or whatever it is you're involved in. Bill, you mentioned that courage is working when workers come to you with solutions instead of problems. And when I read that, I said to myself, can we just make a rule, and I don't mean this to be silly, but don't bring me your problems, bring me your solutions. And of course, the boss has to not live by it, but follow that, accept the worker's solution, or at least give it a try or a thought. Can it be done that way, or am I making it overly simple?
No, I think that's important. I think that, here's a couple of words that I think leaders and managers need to say more often. What do you think? What do you think we should do? Because people come to you with problems a lot, and they want you to solve it as the leader, and you may know the answer, but they won't become self-sufficient and self-reliant unless they grope through the answer too. So just saying to them, what do you think we should do? And even if they get it wrong, then you can course correct and say, that's interesting, and take the parts of what they say, but then you can educate them about the other parts that you might add so that they can do it successfully. So you want people coming to you not just with problems, you absolutely want them coming with solutions, even if they have to grope to find it, even if you as the leader know the answer.
Bill, you mentioned in your book, I think it's called The 5 Promises of Workforce Courage. Can you take us through those 5 promises?
Yeah, it's the 5 premises of workforce courage. And it's the idea that, so I'm trying to build this new organizational development practice that I call courage building instead of team building. I think courage building is just as important. And there's 5 premises attached to this idea of courage building. The first is that everyone has the capacity to be courageous. In fact, you are biologically equipped to be courageous. So number 1 is everybody can be courageous. The second is that employees perform better when they're working courageously. We perform better when we're operating out of confidence, courage, and conviction than when they're operating out of fear and anxiety. Third, courage is learnable and it's teachable. You've been learning to be courageous since you were a little kid, even when you went out for Halloween and faced imaginary goblins and such. That was a night encountering fear. We've been learning how to be courageous since you were 12 years old and had to confront the schoolyard bully. And there are bullies in the workplace later in life, so it doesn't stop. Number 4, the key to putting courage to work is the regimen of things that you do regularly before challenging situations present themselves. No high diver does one high dive from 100 feet without doing 100 jumps from 1 foot. You have to prepare yourself over time, incrementally, in small ways, in little courage moments, to prepare for the inevitability of the big C courage moment where you really muster it up. And then 5th, the entire workforce benefits when more people are showing up to work each day with just a little bit more courage. So these are the 5 premises attached to the new organizational development practice of courage building.
Bill, in our last 30 seconds, can you tell us, when you go to a company, what is the roadblock to establishing this courage? Is it the corporate culture? Is it the immediate boss who says, I'm going to tell them what to do, or she's going to tell them what to do? What do you find is blocking it?
So oftentimes you're right, courage culture. As you know, culture will eat strategy for breakfast. So culture, if it's not the right culture, it's going to get in the way. The second thing is you need to have goals that give you a pucker factor, goals that bring out the courage mojo. So are the goals too flat, or do you need to amp them up to give people the excitement and fear at the same time?
I think you've given us a wonderful view on things, Bill, and I would like to ask you again, so our audience knows that if they didn't hear it before, our guest today has been Bill Courage. He is the author of, Bill Treasurer. He's the author of Courage Goes to Work, How to Build Backbones, Boost Performance, and Get Results. And to our audience, this is one of those books that you can read very simply. You could read it in a few nights when you get home from work and really start to see a change in the way you view the company and know if your company is starting to move ahead or if it's one of those companies that's just going to lag behind, and maybe it's time for you to start to put out the resumes. Bill, once again, the website and where we can get the book?
CourageBuilding.com, and you can get it at any one of your online retailers. Bill, thank you so very much for having me. And to your listeners, remember, Aristotle said courage is the first virtue because it makes all the other virtues possible. So put courage to work.
Thanks so much for being with us today. We'd like to remind our audience that you've been listening to The Secrets of Success on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm your host, Bill Horan, asking you to please join us again next week at the same time when we will continue our journey to success.